allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, thanks very much. Glad we've had clear weather today. That's the last week. We're all here and open it up for visitor comment. So yes, right now we have a full house. All of our board members are able to attend tonight, so we have no one absent whatsoever. And correct me if I'm wrong, but I do not see anyone who signed into visitor comment tonight. At least my screen is not showing any. Confirmed? Okay, great. So we don't need any visitor comment. Moving on to our minutes. Could I ask our solicitor to give an executive session summary since we last met?
Yes, Ms. Gaming, good evening. So the full board had executive sessions on the following dates for the following reasons. October 23rd to discuss a personnel matter, on 11/13 to discuss a personnel matter, on December 21st to discuss contract negotiations, on January 8th to discuss a personnel matter, on January 22nd, tonight prior to tonight's meeting, to discuss contract negotiations. In addition to those executive sessions, the negotiation committee had executive sessions on the following dates: October 31st, November 16th, and January 10th, and all of those were for the purposes of negotiation planning.
Thank you very much, and I apologize for not using my mic earlier. All right, I have three different minutes that are in need of approval tonight. The board workshop minutes of November 13th, the board meeting minutes of December 4th, and the board meeting minutes of January 8th. Can I have a motion?
Second.
Thank you. Motion by Ms. King, second by Dr. Wayak. Do I have any questions about any of those before moving on? Actually, I had one point. As board president the last time on the January 8th meeting minutes, it states from the beginning under visitor comment that Amy Bauscher spoke in the first section of visitor comment. And as you all recall, she signed in to speak, did not speak at the first session because her comments related to what we were discussing under the education curriculum presentation. And so I was wondering if the board would be amenable to making a change just so it accurately reflects she didn't speak under that first visitor comment period, and either eliminate that she spoke in the first visitor comment period because the minutes do reflect that she spoke during the education presentation, or simply refer in visitor comment to the fact that she, as a high school English teacher and union president, spoke during that section. But I don't want to state that she spoke during that first visitor comment portion when she did not. So I guess I will make the motion. See, is everyone in favor of eliminating her comment from the visitor comment initial section of those meetings, because it is repeated and reflected accurately in the presentation section that she spoke and the topic she spoke upon? Any objections to that change? So I guess I'm making a motion to make that change. Can I have a second on that change? Thanks. And just for the clarification for our board secretary, that's just eliminating Amy Bauscher's name under visitor comment and having it solely appear once. All right. And can I call a vote then? I have a motion, a second. Any other questions about that? Can I have a vote to simply approve my change? Not for all the minutes yet, just to approve that change. All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, great. Thank you so much for working through that. Now, any other questions about any of these November, December, January minutes, or any other concerns anyone saw?
I have a question.
Oh, yeah, Tim, go ahead.
This might be this is a new board member question, and I don't know if it's to you or to who it's going to, but there might be times when I have to abstain from a vote. And my understanding is there's a form that we have to fill out. Does that eventually show up in the minutes someplace, or is that just our own records? Is it, I didn't know.
I think, is that something you have to submit to the minutes that then get you just don't, okay.
I know there's a form that I turn in, I give it to somebody.
Okay.
Maybe that's a conversation I need to have with somebody outside of this group, or like not in public, but
I have to say, I don't know if it's attached to the minutes online. I haven't looked after. It's not, We just file, okay, I'm
Yeah.
hearing we just file it in a cabinet in our office as a record of, but it's not attached in the minutes. It doesn't need to be electronically attached or approved. It'll be kept on file once you fill it out.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Okay, great. Any other questions? Seeing none, all those in favor of approving the minutes from November, December, and January? Aye. Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? All right, great. Motion carries unanimously. I'll hand it over to Dr. Mann for his superintendent update.
Okay, thank you. Mrs. Gaiman, first, I want to acknowledge that tonight, as is all of January, is Board Appreciation Night in Southern Lehigh School District. And I want to offer our sincere gratitude for your service, your devoted service to the school district, and most especially its students. A few brief things before we get into what is a packed and I think very exciting agenda tonight. I want to welcome two guests. We have Ken Mower, who is our representative from L-Tri-C. L-Tri-C will be on the budget tonight. Mr. Pepe will be presenting information about that, and Mr. Moore is here to answer questions. And Chris Betley is here from Bucknell and Lasicki, our auditor. I want to thank Chris for the great work that he did in putting together our audit and actually making us a bit better as a school district and as a business office. And we look forward to your presentation later tonight when you were introduced by Mr. Pepe. Quick update on calendar. We've had 2 snow days, which I think is 2 more than we had all of last year. We have 2 more traditional snow days remaining in the calendar. I think very wisely, Southern Lehigh's school board has prioritized in-person instruction. And when we have a snow day, unlike many places, it is a traditional snow day and that students are home and the day has to be made up. Now, we put in 4 traditional snow days, and so as not to completely disrupt the calendar and graduation and all the end of the year activities, after we get past the 4th snow day, and we hope not to get there, we will convert to something called a flexible instructional days where students, and this was approved on the calendar last year, we get to flexible instructional days where students will actually be working from home, online, virtually with their teachers. We're going to begin the process of reaching out to our teachers and in turn, teachers reaching out to students with the details about that in the event it should occur. But I just want to kind of pass that along as an update on our calendar and our plans. Next, I wanted to just let the board know that we had a failure of a pump at the boiler at Liberty Bell Elementary. Fortunately, there are 2 pumps, so we're good. But we're making some emergency repairs. We're getting a new pump in place. We'll have that approved at our next board meeting, but given the emergency, because if the pump we have goes down, then we're without heat in the building. We didn't want to be in that position. So we're moving very quickly with that repair. And with that, that concludes my report, and we look forward to some very exciting things later on in the agenda. Thank you, Mrs. Gaiman.
Okay, thank you. Moving on, we have a Science Explorers event agreement. We have now, do we have a presentation on this or is this just, okay. This is what we discussed at our workshop meeting last time.
Correct.
So we've already been introduced to this. So can I have a motion to approve the Science Explorers event agreement for 23-24? The Southern Lehigh Education Foundation will reimburse the district for all costs associated with this agreement, and we are thankful for those efforts. I see you have a question. Before the question, oh, you were going to make the motion? Perfect. Can I have a motion?
Motion to approve the science program.
Thank you, Mr. Kearney. And a second. Carney, sorry. And a second. Second. Thank you, Ms. Torba. All right. Any questions regarding that item? All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? All right, great. And again, we thank both the administration for coordinating that and the Education Foundation for funding it. We hope to see more in addition to dual enrollment funding. This is the second thing we've seen that the Education Foundation is funding, and we are very grateful for that. Moving on to item 5B, we have materials inventory for disposal. I have some very old social studies books. Good job finding those. Could I have a motion to approve the disposal?
So moved.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Cruz, for the second. Thank you, Dr. Wack. Any questions on those? Yes, Mr. Carney.
They do look into donating to, they've looked into that before disposing them. Does
We
anybody
do.
want them?
We have vendors come out to see if they're usable or if other school districts want them. These were not
Thanks.
in demand.
I think the last disposal was more successful in having a demand. These not so much. All right, good question.
We do partner with someone who helps us locate districts or other entities that would benefit from items that we're no longer needing or in use.
All right, thank you. Any other questions? Seeing none, all those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? All right, moving on. We have the Softball Booster Club of Southern Lehigh bylaws to approve. I think hidden by the podium. I think I see a representative in the audience tonight, so we appreciate you coming out in case there are any questions, but we won't put you on the spot. I just want to thank you for being here. Can I have a motion to approve the Softball Booster Club bylaws? Thank you, Ms. King, for the motion.
Second.
Thank you, Dr. Wayak, for the second. Any questions? All right, seeing none, all those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? One abstention. All right, great. Well, you can get the paperwork from Ms. Lobley at the end of the meeting, and now we know they're kept in a filing cabinet. So, okay, good.
I'll make sure you get that back right away.
All right, great. Moving, and thank you. You feel free to stay or leave as you see fit. We appreciate you coming out since you were on the agenda for those booster, and thank you for establishing a booster club for softball. It'll be very helpful. You're welcome. All right, moving on. We have McGraw-Hill Study Sync for. I'm sorry. I lost my place in the agenda. Motion to approve the quote for McGraw-Hill for Study Sync ELA grade 12. We discussed this at our last meeting. Do we have any follow-up or any other presentation associated with this item tonight? Okay. Can I please have a motion? Thank you, Ms. King. And a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Mond. Any questions before we vote? Any comment? All right. Seeing none. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? All right, great. Moving on to the program of studies. Can I have a motion to approve the Southern Lehigh High School program of studies?
So moved.
Thank you, Ms. Cruz. And a second? All right, Mr. Boyer, thank you for the second. Any questions about the program of studies before we proceed? Thank you. I wanted to say thank you. I do have one question that I did not ask. Thank you for your presentation, Mr. Miller, at our last board meeting. The only follow-up question I had there were kind of two items I just wanted to clarify from last year when we discussed the course of study, which was at the first page of that course of study, there's a list of all of the AP courses, which is a great selection of AP courses and dual enrollment, and kudos to the high school staff and administration and for making so many opportunities for our students available for dual enrollment and college credit and getting a head start on all of that. And also for increasing the flexibility of that program of studies this year. Like, huge kudos and thanks. The clarifying question I just wanted to ask was, I noticed on that front page listing AP courses that all of the AP courses we offered are listed, but that information page is also sent out to colleges and universities or any continuing studies, after high school institute, to provide a snapshot of our high school. So, for institutions that aren't necessarily familiar with Southern Lehigh and want to know the quality of education we provide, which is why that list is wonderful. My question is, that list has some AP courses, for instance, AP Physics 2, that I can't remember the last time AP Physics 2 ran. And my question is that list, although it is offered, so if we have interest, it runs. My question is that list updated to reflect, for instance, when we're sending that out to institutions, AP Physics, Computer Science, I think there was probably a capstone AP course or two, something like that, that are perhaps listed there, but a student didn't actually have the opportunity to take. Is that reflected in any way? Or is this the sheet that is sent to those institutions? You know what I'm saying? Are we approving
Could
Well,
you
these are
explain?
options that are provided in our,
Right.
because it's offered as a course request.
Right.
So if 7 students do a course request for AP Physics 2, we would have to run that against what other availability or what conflicts are. If there's 25, that's a full section of students. So we wouldn't want to limit
No.
the opportunity for a student to take an AP course of AP Physics 2. So we will include it and see and determine how that aligns with a master schedule of 6 or 7 students or 25 students, depending on the number of students who request to take that course.
Gotcha.
So I would like to see it reflected.
Yes.
Um,
But we're not certain if this is what's sent and because
That's-
it's approved or if it's,
Right.
okay.
That's an
Depends on the
annual,
year.
that is an annual adjustment we would make depending on the number of students who would request that
Okay.
course.
So perhaps it would be listed one year and
could.
not, okay,
Right.
thanks. Thanks for that clarification. And the other question I had relates to the opportunity for college credit and flexibility we had discussed last year at this time with regard to having an academic, almost a work-life balance. And we discussed then the possibility of a student, especially since we're a small district, or if a student wanted to take that online college course that isn't reflected in a class, but wanted to sit in that, there's an item under scheduling and summer class availability, summer acceleration. And there's a line in there that we discussed this time last year saying that it currently states, at least it stated last year, and I think it still currently states, page, 29, it's listed very easily. The opportunity to take summer acceleration exists. However, it's stated in a bullet on the requirements that any student who takes a summer acceleration course cannot have a study hall in their schedule immediately, for the academic year immediately following that summer. I know last year we discussed, and as a result of the discussion, it was said that since we really want to encourage students to pursue those opportunities and we want students to have, work-life balance, as it were, academic work-life balance, and because we're a small district where we might only have one AP course here and there, and so they might overlap, the discussion was had that if a student needed to take summer acceleration, but also because they were taking so many AP courses to have a work-life balance, they could appeal and talk to the guidance office and talk to administration about that. It would be a special permission given, special circumstance, discussed with your guidance counselor. That bullet still exists, and I was just wondering, and I know students took advantage of that this year. I know we currently have students doing that. So I wanted to ask if that is a bullet we could perhaps put an asterisk by, saying like, this is the policy, but those wishing to pursue that, need to have approval through their guidance counselor.
And that's the process that exists now.
That is the process,
Yes.
and that's the process we continue to have. There's been no
Correct.
change there going
No.
forward. Okay. I mean, I would say that if there's a possibility to add that or to communicate that in some way,
Yes,
but I just want to make sure that
that
opportunity
process has not changed.
okay, the process has not changed, and that opportunity is still there. Okay. I just saw the bullet, and I'm always reticent to, is that something we could put an asterisk by or communicate currently tonight, just to establish that permission is needed? Since it's our practice,
Which bullet in particular are you talking about?
the one that says on page 29,
I see it on 23.
it says summer, like the fourth one maybe? I'm sorry, I'm trying to get to it right now. It says if the student takes summer acceleration, they must have a full schedule the following year. Thank you. Well, I thought it was bullet 4. I still haven't pulled.
I see. It may not have a study hall in the following year for the summer acceleration. Right.
Could we add an asterisk there saying unless, some sort of language?
Mhm.
If it's something that we can, if it's a non-substantive change that we can just add before we publish to the students, or if it's something we have to change tonight and vote upon, I will defer to whomever's the expert in that area. Is that
Yes, I'm sorry,
Is
yes.
that a non-substantive change that can, when we're
We
publishing
could
it,
just put in
Right.
a few words that reflect our practice.
right
which-
there, right
which
in
is-
that
Which
bullet?
is kind of what I've
That's fine.
articulated
Perfect.
now. It's in a case-by-case basis.
If
We
can-
set some parameters, but if I walk in to my school counselor or my principal and say, here are my circumstances, we would accommodate those
Perfect.
circumstances.
Can we just put that in that
Mhm.
bullet?
Mhm.
That would be great. And is that something that's fine? It's not substantive because it's current practice. Perfect. Thank you. I really appreciate that. So when that gets sent out to students, that'll just be clear for everyone. All right, that's all I have. I really thank you all for entertaining that, and I
think it really opens our students up to incredible flexibility and opportunity for after their high school graduation. Any other questions? Seeing none, all those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? All right, moving on. Special Education and Student Services, we don't have any items under that, nor technology, business and finance, bills list. I'll hand it over to Mr. Pepe.
Thanks, Madam President. So before you tonight, we have a little bit of catching up here. We have bills list from December as well as bills list from January. So the 1.7 million representing December, January 1.5 million. And some of the December include some items that did not make November's cutoff based on timing. So December's a little heavier there. And additionally, we had under construction fund, you can see various charges associated with the HVAC project that is already at the beginning, ongoing. And Dewey Engineering was a closeout piece from the brick repointing. So I'm just going to go over a couple of highlights on the bills list. I'll start with the December 18th bills. The first big one you see on there that's new is Buckno Lasicki, and that happens to be our auditor who's here tonight. We changed auditing firms. We'll be talking about that. That's part of the annual fee for the audit, which is in line with where we've previously been. But it's a really, really good audit, very detailed, and we'll touch on that. Moving on, Carbon Lehigh IU21, you'll see 569,000. That's broken out between elementary and secondary, 275. And that's with all of our agreements for special ed services and what's going on up there. No problems with that. Debt book 6,000 had to do with the GASB 87 lease and the GASB 96 Sabitas that we covered extensively a couple of months back. You'll see Edmentum, 21,370. That had to do with tech software for one of our programs. Frontier, 3,300. That actually has to do district-wide with the 911 backup systems and security systems. Going on, HC9 Company, 7,440. That's curbing for the high school HVAC project. That's to accommodate the $54,000 unit that's part of that project. That had already been previously approved. HSA Mechanical, superintendent already talked about some of the things that are going on that had to do with a rooftop unit that was leaking and boiler issues at Liberty Bell. Those were emergency repairs, $8,200. Integra One, $182,000 is part of the tech infrastructure, and that covered $129,000 switch and $50,000 of warranties and site licenses. And that was all eligible for the E-rate program. Chris, thank you for you and your team. That's exciting stuff that needs to happen. Moving on, Martinizing dry cleaning, $1,400 is not for our suits. It's actually for the high school football uniforms being cleaned up at the end of the year. So I saw that on there. I thought that might be of interest. Municipal capital finance, you'll start seeing that on a regular basis. That represents 2 months worth of the copier lease payments. That's you'll see on the next month is the 6,000 figure. Nazareth Music Center, 16,600 was part of the kettle drums that were purchased. They're new, 4 of them. And again, that was something that had been waiting for a number of years to replace equipment, and it was finally its time. New Story LLC, 18,700. That's another special ed placement. Norman's Bus, 143,000. That's a typical monthly bill. Petroleum Traders Corporation, for any of the new board members, that is part of our co-op bid that we're on with the county for diesel for the bus. And Pioneer Manufacturing Company, 5,700. That had to do with portable stadium seating. It's actually the seating for the players down at the stadium. And that had to actually be upgraded with the rubber bases so to protect our field. So that's what that's for. Southern Lehigh Public Library, 17,850. Again, if you've been following along over the last year, that's one of the quarterly payments. That's the second quarter. And we are on target for the annual 71,400. Upper Saucon Township, 1,700 or 17,700. That's part of the SRO middle school and high school. And that's it for December. Unless there's any other questions, I'm going to move right into January. January, there's not as many that were highlighted. You'll see again, Bucknell-Lasicki and Company, $1,000 based on the accrual basis of accounting. Our auditor follows that. As the work is performed, then they bill. That was the final billing. And if there's any more bills, we'll hold them till next year. That means we're not paying them, sir. Okay. Hannaberry HVAC, that was again, repairs and maintenance on a train unit. And we went and, Mike Rohrbach does a good job of getting multiple quotes and prices. And that's where we ended up with Hannaberry, very good company. Hotel Saucon, you'll see that's part of negotiated settlement. That's going to be on another part of the agenda, but it's in the bills list. Christ Transportation, that's our new transporter that took over our major routes, and Lehigh Carbon and Lehigh Career Technical, part of our partnership with those groups. Miller Flooring Company, 27,700. That's actually the bill for the repair of the tennis court. We actually already received the insurance ahead of the bill, so we were really quickly getting that done. And again, thanks to Mike and his group for helping on that.
From when that tree fell, right? Okay,
That is
thanks.
correct. As I said, municipal capital, you see the other regular monthly lease. New Era Technology, 18,000. That was the final payment for the virtual environment that technology had been working on. Norman's Bus, 117. School district insurance, $58,000. That's part of our annual workers' comp bill. And again, that's with another consortium of school districts that we belong to, SDIC. They're doing a really, really good job. And even though we're in some of these consortiums, we still go out and check the market. I actually did a check on them last year through the broker to try and find other workers' comp insurance. Nobody could beat them. So, not only were we satisfied, but we still did our due diligence to go out and check the market. And outside of that, typical Voyager Soares Learning is part of our ARP learning loss monies. Okay. And Karen, great job with that. And that's pretty much it for that month. Any questions on that? If not, Madam President, that's our bills for the month.
All right, thanks very much. If no one objects, do you have a treasurer's report? We could just take one vote and have you keep rolling?
That's correct. You can do that because
Okay.
the treasurer's report, again, we're all caught up. We took care of October, November, and December. We're in great shape.
Thanks so much. All right, so under Mr. Pepe, really appreciate your detailed explanation for all of that. Very, very much appreciated because that can get quite confusing, especially when it's that long. We have under business and finance, items 8A, B, C, property tax refunds. Any explanation there that we need before voting? It's pretty standard, but if anyone, Mr. Pepe. We also have, I will not take a vote on the audit report because we have an individual here tonight to speak to that, but could I have a motion to approve items 8A through C? Thank you, Mr. Boyer, for that motion. And a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Carney, for the second. Any further questions? Seeing none, all those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? All right, motion carries unanimously. I'll hand it back over to Mr. Pepe to introduce our new auditor for the audit report.
Okay, thank you. All right, this is working or not? There we go. Okay, so Madam President, members of the board, is this working? There you go. So tonight, it gives me great pleasure to introduce Chris Betley from Bucknell-Lasicki. We went through a pretty extensive process of interviewing auditors. Our previous auditor had told us it's time for me to retire and move into the sunset. And I think he's actually down in Florida. So After going through a number of groups that we interviewed, we centered on Bucknell Lasicki. And part of what really appealed to us was the level of detail provided in the audit and the explanation of the various aspects and elements of the audit, which we actually saw. Sometimes when you interview somebody, they put out a really good, position, and then you end up looking at them on the job and it's like, doesn't quite measure up. In this case, I can tell you everything that was presented is actually what was done. And given the fact that it was first year client for them with us and new auditor for us with them, it went really, really smooth, as detailed as it was. Field work took about 2 to 3 weeks, and then there was extensive follow-up to produce the documents that you have. So with no further ado, I'm going to introduce Chris Betley. Chris, take it away.
Thank you, Lou. Raise this up. Thank you, Lou. Good evening, members of the board. I'll try not to take too much of your time. I know you guys have a packed agenda. It should only take about 5 or 10 minutes. I'll try not to bore you too much during this, but basically everybody should have a copy of our audit report. Either you have it in front of you or you have a PDF. I'm sure everybody read through the entire report before I came, right? Everyone do their homework. There's basically 3 reports in here that I will go over, and then I'll hit kind of on the numbers just briefly. But on page 1, this is called our independent auditor's report. All right. The first paragraph there kind of goes over what we're giving an opinion on. We're giving an opinion on your governmental activities, your business type, which is for you guys, your food service funds, and your note disclosures. Right? Second paragraph on page 1, most important paragraph of the audit report says, in our opinion, the financial statements referred to above present fairly in all material respects. So that's basically called an unmodified opinion on your financial statements, a clean opinion, A on your report card, same opinion that you guys have gotten in the past, right? If you go down in our independent audit report, basis for opinions, this just explains that we conduct our audit in what's called generally accepted auditing standards. And on top of that, we also conduct an audit using governmental auditing standards because you guys are a government entity. So standards, we use standards on top of standards, right? So if we were going to just do an audit of a company, we would just use the generally accepted auditing standards, but because you guys are government, there's additional standards we have to follow. Right? Responsibilities and management, that section there just explains that it's management's responsibility to prepare the financial statements correctly and to develop internal controls to prevent any misstatements. That's Lou's job. That's his staff's job to do that. We cannot be involved in the preparation of your financial statements. We're required to be independent of that. Right? On top of page 2, under auditor responsibility, this just explains that we're required, we give reasonable assurance that the financial statements are free of misstatement. All right. Reasonable assurance is a very high level assurance, but it's not absolute. All right. We're 99% sure the financial statements are accurate and free of misstatement. Mm-hmm. Coming down to the bottom there, required supplement information. There's a lot of information in this report. We don't give an opinion on every single thing in this report. There's what's called a management discussion analysis. That's something that Lou and his staff prepare. There's also a lot of pension and other post-employment retirement schedules in the audit report. We do not give an opinion on that information. Mm-hmm. And on page 3, there's just a paragraph in there that explains that there's also what's called your single audit is part of this big report, which I'll go over in a little bit. All right, so that's our independent audit report. If you turn to page 4, this is called our independent audit report on internal control. Now, we are not giving an opinion on whether the school district's internal controls are operating effectively. We are required, however, to obtain an understanding of your internal controls. So we do interviews, walkthroughs, looking at transactions. And if we came across any kind of issues, they're called significant deficiencies or material weaknesses. One is bad, the other is very bad. They would be reported in here that we found deficiency internal control. And you can see in the bottom here, it says that we did not identify any kind of deficiencies in your internal controls. Now, we're always trying to strengthen internal controls. So we did make a lot of recommendations, especially this being our first year. And we do a lot of other different school districts. We did make a lot of recommendations how to strengthen and improve internal controls, but we didn't find any kind of issues that would need to be reported as a deficiency in here. All right, that's good. And then the last report, it's kind of toward the back on page 81. Within the back, there's what's called, you guys get a single audit. So a single audit is if you have over $750,000 in federal expenditures, what kicks in a single audit. When a single audit kicks in, then we have to do a audit of your what's called major programs. So we audit your federal programs, all right? Think of that as its own separate audit. We audit every program that the federal government has specific compliance requirements that you guys are supposed to follow. So we basically make sure that you guys are following all of those compliance requirements. This year, we audited what's called the IDA funds. Every year, it's on a rotation basis. And you can see on this top page 81 that you guys are in compliance with all the compliance requirements for that program. We didn't find any kind of issues with that IDA program this year. All right. So all good news on all accounts for all three reports. All right. Just to kind of go over quickly some of the numbers on page 21. Now, if you're going to read, maybe if you're just going to look at maybe one page of this entire report, maybe 2 pages, this would be one of the pages I would look at. This page and probably your budget to actual schedule in here are probably the 2 most informative schedules. But if you look on page 21, it kind of has in the left-hand column is what's called your general fund. Right? These are all the operating activities of the school district. Right? You also have your special revenue fund, which is your student activities and scholarship stuff. Your capital reserve funds, a little self-explanatory, and then your capital projects funds, which is basically your construction projects, which are mostly funded through bond proceeds. Right? But if you look at your general fund on the left side there, you can see toward 3/4 down there, we had a net change in fund balance of $6.7 million. Right? You look a little farther below there, you'll see what's called a prior period adjustment. What we do is we had to restate some of your beginning fund balances based on some of the accounting rules that we saw from the prior audits. You can see that's a big number of $2.4 million. We didn't get $2.47 million. We just had to move some from one fund to the other fund to restate those balances. So from your trust fund to your general fund. All right. So that's what that prior period adjustment. And that's pretty common when there's new auditors come in and there's some things that need to be fixed to be in compliance with accounting principles. Right? So your ending fund balance at June 30th was $26.3 million. Right? If you go to page 18, page 18 is basically your balance sheet of your general fund. And you can see toward the 3/4 down there, fund balance. You can see what kind of makes up that $26.3 million that we have in fund balance. Right? And you can see of that amount, we have $4.2 million of unassigned fund balance, free fund balance, unrestricted fund balance. Right? So that's kind of the highlights of the numbers. And I know Lou will talk a little more about all of that in his presentation. Last thing I'll go over is you guys should have gotten what's called a governance letter. It's probably about 10, 15 pages. At the end of the audit and the conclusion of the audit, we're required to communicate certain things with the board. And you can see in that report that we would report anything, if we had any difficulties in dealing with management, if we had any kind of uncorrected adjustments that we proposed, any other disagreements that we had with management, and you can see in here that we had none of those issues in dealing with management. Everything we asked for, just so you guys, everything we asked for, we got timely. We got answers to our questions timely. For a first-year audit, there's a lot of work involved in a first-year audit. Double the amount of work. It takes a lot of time on their end, a lot of time with the staff of asking questions and requesting documents. And we got all that information we needed, and we got it timely. Right? So I want to thank you to Lou and his staff for the cooperation during the audit, especially being a first year.
And especially want to call out Shannon Williams for that too, because she ends up being the point person on a lot of the audit materials that need to get put together as the accountant and now as the assistant BA. It's nice to know we got good quality people that we can rely on.
So that's all I have. If anybody has any questions on the audit.
Thank you for that thorough explanation, and thanks to Mr. Pepe and Ms. Williams and for the entire department and central office for first-year audits are a lot of work. So we appreciate, on top of everything else, you putting in those extra hours. And it's good to hear such a good report.
Yeah, audits are a lot of work.
Any questions about the audit report from the board? Yes, Mr. Carney.
You said there were recommendations made, maybe like tweaks or something. Are they in this, or was that conversations? Okay.
We're always trying to strengthen internal controls. No one's ever perfect in their internal controls. We'll never get that way. So there's always little things we can tweak to, whether it's an approval here, extra approval here. There's always a way to strengthen internal controls.
Yes, Ms. Reinhardt.
Will the audit team remain static year over year? Would you rotate members? for your staff and
We like to
audits?
keep them the same, just because they're familiar with what they ask for, so we'll probably keep them the same. It's easier on Lou and his staff, especially, and then they get more experience. As they get more experience, it's better.
Thank you.
Any others?
I would just like to make the observation that oftentimes audits that aren't thorough are very convenient. And sometimes I've heard that there's this kind of a lax where auditors get a little lazy and administration gets a little lazy. And I will say that we were very much pushed by this audit. And that is exactly how we wish it to be. When we talk about our goals at the start of the year, you have seen listed in our goals, improvement of internal controls. This is not new to us, but the work that was put forth by the audit and our administration very much will drive us to be, we've, I think, made some good progress here, but we're looking to institutionalize that progress so that it becomes more durable. And our sincere hope is and expectation and belief is that this audit has pushed us very much forward in that direction. I want to thank all who were involved.
And just to close out, because that was a great question, Tim, a lot of the rigor that was in the audit goes both ways. So we had a lot of conversations about internal controls, testing those internal controls, and asking the auditors what else do you see that we could be doing to strengthen those internal controls? And as things came up, they were immediately addressed, discussed. So, as Dr. Mann said, that was one of our goals. So we feel really good about that. And that way we all sleep better. Okay, so this is going to lead right into the next. So you want to go ahead and take the vote?
Take the
so
vote,
we can
yes,
accept?
the vote to it. Thank you for coming out tonight and giving us that explanation. Could I please have a motion to approve the audit report as presented? So, Ms. Reinhardt, thank you for the motion.
Second.
Thank you for the second, Dr. Wayock. We already had a time to question, so I'll just call the vote. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? All right, thank you very much. Feel free to, leave. The rest of the night is yours. We appreciate. Look forward to work with you. All right, thank you, Mr. Pepe. Yes, moving on to the budget update for CLIU and LTRI-C. We'll let you make your presentation, Mr. Pepe, and then Mr. Moore is here this evening representing. Suddenly has a representative to LTRI-C. And if we have any specific questions for Mr. Moore, thank you very much, Mr. Moore, for coming out to. We'll let Mr. Pepe introduce these budgets. As soon
Okay.
as the battery, there you go. As soon as the batteries are replaced,
There you go.
good to go.
All right. So first of all, that was great information, and that's going to actually lead us right into where we are, the update on the process and the budget. So the draft annual school budget for 24-25. Before we start getting into 24-25, let's come back to 22-23, the year that just ended. That revealed a continued focus on fiscal management. That's one of the things that we've strived to do since we've been here. And it's really nice about budgeting because you really need 3 years worth of budgets to really firmly start to understand where things are. So the 22-23 budget we picked up, it was actually completed when we came on board and we presented it out and started. So here we go. And I say we because fortunately, Dr. Mann and I started at the same time as Dr. Trinkle. So administratively, we all showed up at the same time. So that fiscal management was achieved by, number one, controlling expenditures. And when I say controlling expenditures, I'm not talking about necessarily not making a purchase. We're still purchasing the goods and services that are needed to operate the district, but paying specific attention to how we're purchasing, making sure that we're using consortiums or national cooperatives to get the same quality product at a much better price. And every dollar saved allows us to restore our fund balances. And that was the second target here, restoring fund balance. And lastly, maintaining tax millage stability, because we are in the business of education. Delivery of instruction is paramount, but we have to be fiscally responsible in how we go about that, because it has a direct impact on the taxpayer. So looking at that, we were positioning ourselves for further investment in educational program and instruction, as well as meeting our facility needs. That's one of the things we've been talking a lot about because we have a lot of facility needs. So our continued positive results have allowed us to increase our fund balance by the 6.7 million that the auditor talked about. And that's a good, nice number. So how did we get to that? I wanted to break that down. So after auditor adjustments, and that's what he was talking about, the different pages of the audit. I think page 72 shows the overall, it's an $8 million number. However, when you get to page 21 and you look at how it affects our balances, it went from 8 to 6.7. So I'm going to break that down for you. So it starts on the expenditure side. We were able to reduce expenditures by 3.6 million from what was budgeted. Okay. Now this is including, but not limited to, these are the big hitters. Personnel savings, salary and benefits, 2.8 million. A lot of that goes to the team, but also our educational leader, Dr. Mann. And we had talked about this over the years since we've been here through attrition. Whenever there's an opening, we don't just necessarily restaff. We look at the job description. We look at what's involved. We look at, can we shift some of those responsibilities to existing personnel that are already here? And if we can, we do. If we can't, then we restaff. But when we restaff, we also look at where's a new person coming in, and can we increase and get a better person in a position at a better rate? And if possible, we do that. So all totaled, that has an impact on salary and benefits because it's directly correlated to your pension payments and your health benefit contributions and payments. Transportation, 749,000. That's a combination of, I had an opportunity to renegotiate the contracts when the transporter was selling. So a lot of midday run routes that we would have paid for, we didn't have to. And that will also be a savings in the current year. Consolidation of routes. That has to do with the team in the office led by Sue Knoll, working with the contractor to try and make sure that we are efficient in our routes and that we have every bus fully utilized. So all totaled for this year, that was a nice savings. Curriculum, 362,000. When you look at Dr. Trinkle and the presentations that she's been making with Dr. Solomini, that has to do with their use of grants and restructuring the overall plan for that department. So they were the big components behind the 3.6 million on the expenditure side. On the revenue side, it was a banner year. It just kept on going better and better. So this includes unanticipated gains in EIT, which is the employee tax. Okay. And the tax really reflects the fact coming out of COVID, more people started going back to work. Therefore, we started getting more on the earned income tax and real estate transfer tax, 6.72, $672,000. That had to do with, again, the real estate market. And if you remember and you were paying attention, with interest rates still at that low, going back to the 22-23 year, there were more homes selling and there were more new homes coming online. So either way, we were getting that transfer tax, and that was up way more than what was budgeted or projected based on prior budgets. State aid, we received as a district 1.2 million that was unanticipated as far as an increase in state aid. Now that was great for that year. Moving forward, we have concerns. And the last one, which I'm very pleased to report, and I've kind of kept the board abreast as I was doing this, was we started strategic investment of our monies. And I started actually closing down some accounts with some of the banks to consolidate into better aligned accounts for us. And we went from like 0.10, 0.10, 0.30 to 5.27% on interest. So we gained 629,000 more than was projected. We had budgeted, I think that year the budget was 200,000. I upped that to 375 in the current year, and we're already on target. We're about 600,000 ahead already. So that's a good thing. So with that, I put the footnote so that you can make the connection or the correlation between the audit adjustment. And one of the things that it reflects is when the budget was struck, we actually had a revenue shortfall of 1.2 million, meaning that it wasn't a balanced budget. And if you remember, I've been talking about trying to get to balanced budgets. So when the budget was put forward, the expenditures exceeded the revenue. By the time we were done and closed the year out, we spent less than what was projected, and we received more than what was budgeted for the revenue. So that's how that ties out. Is there any questions about that? That's about the biggest part of this, but the auditor already helped me out because he covered some of this. All right, so moving on. Increase in fund balance is 6.7 million. That allowed us to assign it right to capital reserve. And that brings our capital reserve up to 14.8 million. Now it seems like a lot. However, that's against 13.4 million of total considerations that have already been identified by EI as level 1 and level 2. And these are all part of the KCBA report that was issued in 2018. So these aren't new, but they were never accounted for as far as budgeted to move forward. So let me break these down when I said level 1 and level 2. There's actually 6 levels of prioritization with facilities projects. Level 1 and level 2 is our focus. Right now, that's on essential building systems. That covers repair and replacement of structural, mechanical, electrical, plumbing, security technology, communication systems, and site work. So a lot of what you've been hearing we're spending on is targeted, and that's right in line with level 1. So these are still an additional $8 million worth of identified projects that have not started yet. Level 2 is building skin, which is repair or replacement of roofs, windows, doors, masonry. So when we talked about the IS, the brickwork, that would have been a level 2, and the infrastructure with technology would have been a level 1, because we need our access system in order to operate. What I also want to point out is level 3, which is building code issues. Nothing was identified. So we're code compliant, which is great. Level 5, hazardous material abatement. Again, nothing was identified, which is great. So we're in good shape there. So we don't have to take care of anything in those categories. As far as ADA upgrades, we've already been doing some of that as we need to. We didn't necessarily have to schedule a big project. We did one here at the high school. It came up at a board meeting when there was a question about the bathroom facilities in the nurse's office. We got right on it and already covered it. And then level 6 is projects beyond where the board wants to go as far as any renovations or new projects and that kind of stuff. But we're going to cover this with the facilities committee, okay? So moving on, I'm going to break down what was identified in level 1 and level 2. So under essential building systems, the chiller replacement at Liberty Bell, that's about a $600,000 price tag. That involves 250-ton units that are over 24 years old. So if those systems fail, our principal at Liberty Bell is going to get a lot of people in that building very, very concerned very quickly. So that's something that we want to make sure doesn't happen. Mechanical upgrades at the high school, and I say mechanical upgrades at the high school, this is in addition to the big HVAC project that we're already undertaking. So these are areas that are not part of that project, like the auditorium, DX equipment replacement, chiller water, AU, and classroom unit ventilators, and that's 7.5. So like tonight, we were in a really hot room. That's part of the challenge that would be covered under this. And then we have everything from like a sidewalk replacement at the high school. The steps near the bus loop are in major need of repair. That's about 75,000. So that's the 8.2 under level 1. Level 2, building skins, that's the replacement again, Liberty Bell, 23 years is the roof. And we've been talking about that. And as we have, continued to assess, we don't want to replace a roof just because on paper it's past its warranty. If it's still functional and we're not having any major issues, we try and get a few more years out of it. We've already extended that roof 2 more years from when it was identified as needing to be replaced. So that's where that money's earmarked for. The KCBA report already picked it up in September of 2018, estimated at 1.7 million. Today's roofing costs have gone up like everything else with CPI. So at $50 a square, we're talking 2.1 million. In addition, middle school roof repairs were identified. We've been continuing to, make a lot of repairs on our own or having an outside roofing company come in, but they were 724,000 identified, which today's dollars is 915. But you have to consider, am I starting to throw good money after bad? And do we need to look at the complete replacement, which is around 3 million? So that's how capital facilities and capital reserve is really adequately, budgeted at this point. So looking ahead to the 24-25 budget, we still have some remaining challenges. One of the things I just talked about is the facility needs, which we feel much better after the closeout of the audit. That was our targeted goal, and it worked out way better than we had even anticipated 6 months ago. So after that, we have health benefits increases. This year, 5%. That's a little bit artificial because we're using some of the rate stabilization money that's in the fund to tamp that down. Actual trends running 6 to 8%. And that's just on the healthcare side. What's a bigger concern is the RX costs. In recent years, they've averaged between 7 to 15%. And if anybody's looking at any articles about that, they're continuing to move and they're moving one direction, and that's high up. So that's something that's a concern moving forward. Pension payments last year, they gave us a small decrease, and that was the first time in over a decade where the pension actually went down. Now it's already going back up at 34%. And what's really important is to understand that's covering 80% of unfunded liability that the state has with the overall pension. So we're not the only district. Everybody's getting hit with that same 34% of salary. We have negotiations. The SLEA is up, and also we have other groups, and that's district-wide. And then we have uncertainty regarding continued state aid funding. And I know Superintendent has an update on that.
Yeah, many of you might have been following along the basic ed subsidy hearings and the committee reports. And certainly in Pennsylvania, there's no doubt that funding is inequitably spread and that many districts have been underfunded for years. However, Southern Lehigh School District and a small handful of other districts are squarely in the sights of the majority report, in that we have been identified as being overfunded in a way, and that if the proposals go forward as they're written, and again, there's a lot that has to happen for them to be adopted, but Southern Lehigh School District would be severely disadvantaged if the a majority report of the Basic Ed Subsidy Commission is adopted. So while it's premature to say that this is going to be problematic, it's something that is definitely in our sights because we are in the minority of districts just because of our demographics and the back end numbers in our aid ratio that would be, again, seriously disadvantaged in future aid if that report were to be implemented.
Could I ask you a question about that? That also came up in discussions when we've gotten together with other, especially in this new, training time of year, with other boards. This came up in a discussion I was participating in at Parkland. You were there that day. And the discussion point was, as a part of school districts advocating for funding, for additional funding, could you speak to the idea of that funding formula? Districts, superintendents and school directors were saying the concept of it's not necessarily it's uncertain. Like, could you speak to whether the uncertainty of it's not necessarily the same pie will be divided differently between districts, but what is being asked for is for public education to be fairly funded within the state of Pennsylvania. And if that is done, that means every institution would get what it needs to adequately educate our kids. So in effect, just to adequately, because to what degree are it's not to any of our advantages to pit, Bethlehem School District
Of
against
course.
Southern Lehigh School District.
right.
And so the advocacy element here, and we were talking about this as other school directors who advocate for public education funding to help us all out. So could you address that aspect of adequately funding public education is not necessarily taking from one district to give to another? To what degree are you seeing that, reflecting on what you
Yes.
just said, but also to what degree is it just, the funding, where's this going? Do you see it as one pie being split differently? Is that the direction you're saying it's going, or is it just adequately funding public
Yes.
education?
You ask like the critical question that the state is contemplating. It's a complex question, and I will do my best to try to address it. Right, and this issue arose some years ago when it was identified that districts, for instance, I was on the financial committee in Scranton, a recovery committee in Scranton. They were massively, unfairly underfunded, and their buildings were falling, and there was nothing they could do because they were underfunded. They needed more money. They do need more money. All right, and so the state, knowing that was the case in many districts across the Commonwealth, got to work on, because it used to be you just got what money you got, really for no reason. It was just because that's how much you got last year. And so if you were getting more than you should, that inequity stayed in place. And if you were getting less than you should, that inequity stayed in place. It was mind-bogglingly unfair how it worked. So a commission got together and they put together a formula. And they said, based upon your enrollment, based upon how many special ed students you have, how many students you have in poverty, based upon how dense your district is populated, how sparse, if you're a very rural district, they would come up with a cost per student that would apply evenly and equitably across the Commonwealth, where not every district would get the same allocation per student, but the same formula would be used to take into account all of the challenges that the 500 districts across the Commonwealth face. And when they adopted that formula, they said, but we will take all new monies and put it through this formula, but we're not going to take all of the money and put it through this formula because some districts who are overfunded for years would have a significant adverse effect, and they wouldn't be able to make their payroll because all of a sudden the floor would be pulled out from under them. So they instituted what was called a hold harmless clause, in that we're not, even if you're getting more than you should under the formula, we're not going to take it away. All right. So that was the equity portion of the discussion, not the adequacy for discussion, where the new money goes out fairly, but it may not be enough to meet the expectations that the Constitution holds to provide an adequate education to the students of the Commonwealth. All right. So going forward, a group of districts sued, and they said two things. First, you've cemented in inequity, and that some districts are going to get more forever because it's going to take us forever to catch up just doing new money out. And secondly, we don't have enough flat out. right? Because even though it's being distributed equitably, it's inadequate to meet our constitutional needs to provide this education, right? So now this committee tried to address both aspects of that challenge. The first aspect with respect to the funding is that they're saying we're going to roll back that hold harmless. That's where we're concerned, all right, because we will be impacted by rolling back of the hold harmless that will shift money from districts like ours to other places who absolutely need it. And I want to agree wholeheartedly with that point that our neighbors in Allentown need this money. They do. All right. But it leaves unexamined the issue of adequacy. And people are saying we need, I think, $3 billion more in the system altogether to bring it up. And then there's a big fight over that because the court said you should do it, but the legislature has all kinds of ideas based upon often partisan divide, sadly, on how that will be accomplished. But if they change the formula and get rid of the hold harmless, regardless of the adequacy, we're going to be hit as far as future subsidy is concerned. And even if they do adequacy, if they try to increase funding to address the adequacy issue, in many respects, they would view us as somewhat adequately funded. Now, our taxpayers carry a far bigger load in this school district than many. All right, so our local taxpayers are very definitely disadvantaged because so much of the bill is focused on them. But that, again, that's driven by our aid ratio because we have, people who are working hard and they have solid incomes and property values here are fairly high. And that, again, works to our disadvantage when it comes to the formula. So that's my best crack at
Thank you.
the question.
Thank you.
Okay.
And it's a fact that the majority of Southern Lehigh's budget does come from property taxes under that formula. Do you have any advice as to we as community members or as board members about how we can advocate for students in Pennsylvania, not pitting one district against another, but still stand up for our tax base? And do you have any advice that you've heard
Well,
as ways of advocacy for advocating for keeping our funding and also funding any pieces of advice or news sources we
yes.
can turn to?
Here's what I say, and I'm a bit split because as an educator, as a professional educator, there is an absolute case to be made, and I've made it through my career about equity in funding, where districts that are underfunded, who are poor, who are face challenges, unlike what we're facing in Southern Lehigh, deserve more funding. And that's just true. And now, that said, right, I'm not the superintendent in Scranton now. I'm the superintendent in Southern Lehigh. And so I advocate for policies that are supportive of kids, but also are supportive of our taxpayers. And so I think from the Southern Lehigh School District perspective, the hold harmless, there's value to that, right? There's an element of value to say we're not pulling the rug out from under the legs of people, and that as we move toward adequacy and as more funding comes in, yes, it should be allocated fairly, but we need to hold off on maybe pulling the rug from underneath people who are, through no fault of our own, just budgeting based upon subsidies that have occurred in the past. So again, it's a delicate issue. And I think first and foremost, we should not be in a position to pit ourselves against others and recognize at all times that there are school districts with far greater challenges and are far less adequately funded than Southern Lehigh, and they deserve the attention of the Commonwealth and its leadership. But that said, I think there's ways to do that without terribly disadvantaging districts like us who are, carrying a very heavy load on our local taxpayers and particularly our property owners, whose voice should also be heard. So that, I don't know if that answers the question, but that's kind of how I frame it in my mind, because there's divergent answers to a very challenging question.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Yes, Mr. Carney.
I was kind of in the same boat because I taught in Allentown for 34 years. So for 10 years, I was following this case from one perspective.
Mhm.
And even when the reports came out, there's a majority report that has more funding going someplace. And then there's a minority report that wasn't, that would be more friendly to us, I would say.
Mhm.
So now I'm coming from a Southern Lehigh, and the same thing, like the hold harmless thing. I don't want that to leave. And as far as the pension goes, there was some good news. I saw that it did drop a little. It's going to help. The the employer contribution rate went from 34 to 33.9, which might not sound like a lot, but it's a big expense. And it's about 1% lower than the rate that was projected last year even. So went down slightly.
Since
Okay.
I'll let you continue in a second. I had one question about pension that I'd written down, but since we're at a pausing point, do you see that pension stabilizing, or are we still uncertain? I mean, years ago, it was just the pension, our portion of contribution was going to go nowhere but up. And now I heard some speculation that it's leveling out, some speculation that it's not. Do you have any insight as our?
I hope it's leveling out.
Well, yeah,
'cause
we
it's
all
pretty
do.
high.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
But we
I
still-
don't, at this point, we don't anticipate that it's going to continue to go up at the same trajectory level it's been, but it's going to float in this area, which again is still pretty high.
So not quite as steep an increase, but we still anticipate some increase
Mhm.
for the time being. All right,
Yeah.
thanks.
And I think the problem is a lot of times it takes a while to catch up before the actuarials determine, hey, you know what, maybe we shouldn't have suspended it or reduced it last year. And now we end up having to increase it more in the future, but I can't really speculate beyond that other than 34% is pretty high.
Yeah,
And I
thank you.
And
slightly
it's
rounded
market
it.
driven too. So
Yeah.
any market performance below 7.5%, which is a good year for, a return, would exacerbate the problem. Returns above 7.5% would help the problem, but like 7.5% is the zero number for where the pension would either increase or decrease costs to school districts.
Yeah, and even when we talk about like the OPEB, which is the employees' other obligation pension and benefits, that's all figured out by actuarials. And Conrad Siegel actually prepares all that information for us for the audit. And it's based on a lot of speculation. And that's why they make adjustments year over year. All right, so moving into the other basic part of prepping for the audit or for the budget each year. We always, as every other district in Pennsylvania, have two options here. And the first option is to pass a resolution to stay at or below the Act 1 index, which this year, believe it or not, is 5.3%. So we could raise our budget by 5.3% and still be within the Act 1 index. If we choose to go above that, then we have to be authorized for the exception index, and we have to meet the deadline and pass a preliminary budget by February 15th. That's not going to happen. So we actually already took the first action, and that was in the resolution that was adopted at the November meeting, saying that we are not going to exceed the Act 1 index. And with that has three tenets to it. And the board of directors will not increase any tax rate that exceeds 5.3, that they will comply with the procedure set forth in section 687 of the law for budgeting, and that the board of directors certify that any increase in the tax rate will be less than or equal to the index. Well, I can tell you right now, our goal is to bring a budget in at zero again this year. So we're not going anywhere close to the Act 1 index. Now, I say that's our goal. We're still early in the process. We have to see how everything's going to shake out, but that's where we're hoping to be. And the budget calendar, you can easily follow that. I will post that online in the business section as I did last year. And it helps inform the community as well as the board of the different various dates that are important, the actions that are going to take place, and who's responsible for that. So here, for instance, you see January 22nd, we're right on time with the first presentation of the budget, and we're going to be talking about our partnership budgets. So with that, I'm going to move right into there. These are additional areas that impact our overall budget. And the first one is L-Tri-C, Lehigh Carbon Community College. And their budget this year is $281,000 of our budget. Their overall budget is actually down slightly. It's down $3,900 or 1%. The combined school district sponsorship remains the same as it was in the prior year, 6.1 million. So there's no change. LCTI will cover next month. Traditionally, they're about lagging by about a month before they get their budget stuff in. And we're going to look tonight at the CLIU 21. their overall budget, $119,000 or 3.4% increase. The combined district contribution, again, is staying the same. So there's no change to us. So it's still going to be 71,000 for us. So I'll start by going through some of the highlights of the LTRIC budget. The overall expenditures are going up 1.1 million, and most of their budget is salary increases, salary and benefits, 71% of it. Okay. The total expenditures, as I put up there, is 1.1 mil. The salaries and wages include the benefits, and that's down slightly from last year. Last year was 74.4%. The benefits overall are at 5%. That's the figure I talked about earlier. All districts in the Lehigh Valley are part of the Health Benefits Consortium, so we're all going to follow the same line this year on the benefits. And what was really important with their budget, from my perspective, was the fact that they're restoring their reserves. So they have 500,000 of benefits reserve and 420,000 of enrollment stabilization that was earmarked in 23-24 but not needed. So therefore, they're able to put it back into their reserves, which is a good thing. So when I looked at their audit, because I pulled their audit up and went through it, and I saw two key takeaways from the audit, and that was institutional support and instruction. And that's what I just highlighted here. And what it told me is, due to the stabilization of accounts receivable and the associated bad debt they wrote off, they're in a much better position on that role. Instruction, the reason why the decrease is due to declining enrollment, less of a need for additional part-time and adjunct instructors. Not a lot, but just enough to keep the costs where they were. So there's no real big impact on our budget. I talked about the sponsorship. That's where we come in. If you look at the support that they garner from all the sponsors, it's 4.6 to 4.6. It's staying flat, and it remains 10% of their overall budget. That's consistent with the last 2 years. There were 10.4 and 10.3 respectively. So when you line up all the districts that are partners, we're concerned about where are we in the chart. And Southern Lehigh, the operating budget for us is actually down $569. The amount of debt service and capital that we fund is down $833. And overall, $1,400 down. So it's really not moving the needle for us. Okay, either way, it's basically flat. So then moving on to the IU, compared to last year, it's a $119,000 increase, and it's pretty streamlined in the presentation. Benefits are at 5%, salaries are up 3% because they're still in a negotiated year, and the PSERS rate 34.7%. When I looked at their summary of revenue and expense, what I picked up pretty quickly was a 15% increase in the employee share on premium. I called the BA and just had a quick conversation of, what's driving that. It's not a lot in dollars. It's like 4,000 and change. And it's just a matter of employees choosing different programs within. And therefore, if you go up or you go from single to family, you're going to contribute more. So that's what was driving that. The interfund transfer, that's something else that the superintendent and I look at, and we each have our respective meetings up there. And that has to do with how they're moving money within their budget. And it's not necessarily directly impacting us because we're not using a lot of the services wherever possible. If we can do the services in district and save the money, we'll do that. But we benefit from other people who do utilize the services that give them some funds.
And I had the opportunity, I was graciously offered the opportunity to meet with their executive director, their assistant executive director, and their business manager, because we've developed some thoughts about how they could do some budgeting, and they are very receptive. We think that they are responsive to Southern Lehigh's suggestions, and again, we find that it is a very, very positive interaction, and we expect improvements in their budget next year. Again, not in the outcome, but in the process, that we can feel just a bit more confident in recommending its approval.
And likewise, Jeannie Coy, the business administrator there, my counterpart, whenever I ask any of these questions, I get additional information, which I appreciate. So I'm able to look at like the expense. When I see a 5.2% increase on building maintenance and expenditures, I'm like, okay, so what's behind that? And it really stems from 60% of the increase is actual salary increases of 3% and benefits from the group that are in there in that, part of the budget. 26,000 was due to market increases in utilities and maintenance costs, which we're all seeing, CPI up and 4 to 5% on, coming off of historic lows. So that's really it for the partnership budgets. And this is the first of, many presentations as we develop and get through the budget. But do you have any questions at this time? Go ahead.
I do. I found it interesting your comment that enrollment is down. Are those students going elsewhere? Are they going to different programs? Do we know what that looks like? Because I know that, we've been trying to drive
Wanna
students
address
to
it?
dual enrollment and college credit. So
Come on right up to the
And we have Mr. Ken Mower from El Tri-C.
Mr. Moore is suddenly has a representative there, so we thank him for coming out this evening. This is a great opportunity for him to comment on that. Go ahead, Mr. Moore. Thanks.
Good evening. Thank you very much. Should I answer your first question first? The community college's attendance and its enrollment and recruitment and keeping them going is usually the same as the unemployment rate. As the unemployment rate goes down, our enrollment goes down. Keep in mind that a lot of our services are to help re-educate people, to get them new talents and skills to get back out into the workforce and or to completely change a career type situation. So you'll see that ours go down as the unemployment rate goes down. And as you know, the unemployment rate has remained relatively low over the last several years, with the exclusion of what's happened with the pandemic, which sort of flummoxed everybody, I'd say. So, okay, does that answer your question?
Any other questions for Mr. Moore about while we're in Q&A? Ms. Reinhardt?
Enrollment compared, enrollment changes, revision trends compared with Northampton competitor.
Yes,
Northampton Community College.
we look at all 15 community colleges as our enrollment changes and things. Our cost per student we are 13 out of 15 in terms of ours being the lowest per capita or per student. Okay. Hit me with it again. And if I don't know, I'll try and get that to you.
Okay, your enrollment is down.
Yes.
Is those numbers, that reduction consistent across the state of Pennsylvania with other community colleges? Are you higher, are you lower, or are you about the same?
Overall, about the same. Different areas, different regions of Pennsylvania are slightly different. Certain parts, our area, the Lehigh Valley, is growing. Certain areas just north of Baltimore in southern Pennsylvania are growing. The western part of the state is shrinking. And so a lot of that's happening because of the economies in those particular areas of the state. And again, their enrollment tends to be where the unemployment rate is. Interestingly enough, the lowest unemployment rate in Pennsylvania is usually State College.
Yes, sir. Yeah,
That's
Mr.
Center
Carney.
County.
My question was actually
Mr.
for the
Carney.
overall budget, not for him. So I
Oh,
don't know
okay.
when you
Yep.
want me to
I
hit it.
have one of those questions as well, but anything for Mr. Moore at the moment?
Yeah, I had a statement just basically.
Yeah,
I mean,
and the only I'll let you get there. The only thing I also wanted to point out was the really nice thing about this element of our budget. It's the one area in which our budget goes towards benefiting those taxpayers who might not necessarily have students enrolled in these buildings. Folks who are seeking to change careers or re-educate, just classes for individuals who are at a different stage in life. So this is a benefit that they directly, when we say where are our tax dollars going, if I don't have someone in those buildings at Southern Lehigh, this is an example of that.
Yeah, this is not just for your K to 12. This
Right.
basically is for everyone, any resident in the Southern Lehigh School District. It's the one service that you provide that actually provides that breadth of service to the community.
Yeah.
Basically, and again, as Lou had mentioned, our 24-25 proposed budget is before you. It's the 11th year that we have been able to hold the sponsoring school district's total share at that same amount, the 11th year. In fact, the Southern Lehigh School District share for this coming year, the one that you have before you, decreases by around $3,900. So that's because your shares have changed relative to the other school districts, mostly in real estate value in the capital portion of it. While the state requires themselves, the state, to revenue for L-Tri-C to be at 33% from the state, 33% from student funding, tuition, books, other things like that, and 33% from the local sponsor funding and other. Next year, the sponsoring school districts will share is only 10% of the budget of that 33%. That's down from 17% when I first became your trustee in 2000. So that's a significant trend. We try to be sensitive to our sponsoring school districts' financial issues and have worked to supplant the remaining local sponsor revenue through grants, contract services, L-Tri-C Foundation, revenue generating courses, etc. As I mention always every year, what Emily had just brought up about that it's one of the services you provide to every resident of the district. If you have any questions, I'll be able to ask. If I don't know them specifically, I'll get back to you with information. I want to thank you for your ongoing support, and also say that I once again am going to invite the new directors of the Southern Lehigh School Board to meet with representatives of this college, Ann Bieber, the president, myself, and your school district administration, to talk to you a little bit more in depth. I'm sure right now you're swimming in information and that kind of thing. I know that can get a little overwhelming, but at a time when you feel comfortable, we would certainly like to get together with you in a place and a time that is convenient to you, and we'll do that. I'm retired, so my time is flexible, and Ann Bieber has pledged she'll come wherever and whenever you'd like to meet and to help give you a little bit more details of how we are. So that was sort of my little statement. So I'm sorry, more questions you had, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say thank you. I do remember. And we can facilitate the scheduling of that through our board and our board secretary. I remember when I was a new board member meeting with Ann Bieber and yourself. It was very helpful to learn more and to understand how L-Tri-C and Southern Lehigh work together and how our budgets intertwine. So I recommend that to anyone who hasn't taken that opportunity yet. But yes, it's also sometimes nice to have a few months as a board member under your belt, so you are better educated in the questions you're asking. Anything else for Mr. Moore tonight? Yes, Mr. Mon.
I'd like to just acknowledge, since we haven't talked since last year, in getting the dual enrollment program moving with L-Tri-C, you and I had spoken extensively on that and the importance of that offering to our students. So I just want to thank you and L-Tri-C for pushing that through. I think as it grows year by year here, I think it'll be a valuable element within our offerings to students and give them a better, more affordable, potentially focus in continuing education. So thanks.
Thank you for saying that. And the dual enrollment program has taken a huge turn and being involved with what's going on. Again, when I first came on as your trustee, I think there were about 25 students that were participating in the dual enrollment program. Today, I think we're going to be pushing 1,800 students. Now, a lot of things have changed to make that happen. Technology, the use of technology so that a student didn't have to travel to a classroom at an L-Tri-C or something like that. The fact that we're working with the school districts closer, and I'm sure Mike can tell you a lot of the details about that, relative to working with them to make sure that can even use the Southern Lehigh class educators in order to be teachers and that to be part of it. And it's moving larger. And not only can you be dually enrolled, but now we have many students who are actually getting the high school credits and the college credits at the same time in terms of taking that. And so that's an exciting progression to that whole, and it's just continuing to expand at a very, very accelerated rate. So thank you.
I think discounted at $30 per credit, which is the best deal in town.
Best deal in
Highly
town.
transferable credit.
Yes, all transferable.
Yeah.
No, thank you very much. I know we still have a question or two from Mr. Pepe's presentation, but just while Mr. Moore is still here, if there are no other questions. Can I just ask for a motion to approve L-Tri-C's budget just right now? All right, Mr. Boyer for the motion, thank you. And a second? Ms. Cruz, thank you for the second. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? So you're approved. Thank you, Mr. Moore, very
Well,
much for your
thank you.
time.
And I'd like to basically, Mary Joy, the question that you asked, the answer is yes. Most other community colleges in Pennsylvania are significantly lowering the number of students. And of course, the pandemic took us down about, I believe, 20%. And now we're coming back up again. But what we're coming back up again in a lot is virtual students. And virtual has become a very large element of our delivery system. And it was before the pandemic. The pandemic, as I'm sure with you, just accelerated all sorts of things in terms of doing it and having to train our teachers, our educators, and then having to expand our system technology-wise. So, but we also put a lot of money. We put a lot of money into recruitment and retention to try and keep ours up while they've been going down, to try and keep the rates that we're doing and things like that. So, yeah, thank you.
All right, thank you very much.
Thank you all. Thank you.
Appreciate
for
it.
your constant support.
And we appreciate your time. Feel free to leave at any moment this evening now that we're past the L-Tri-C approval. We appreciate you turning out for that. Mr. Carney, I know you had a question going back to Mr. Pepe's presentation about the budget presentation in general.
So I love the savings and the 3 million on personnel. I know when we had the board orientation, there was a chart of what admin looked like. And then they said, that's the old one. There's been some combinations of responsibilities. So I'm wondering, is there something similar, given where we are now, to maybe last year, where roles were combined in all staffing? Like if there was a custodian, that we dropped a custodian and somebody else had to take over that responsibility. And also in the upcoming budget, if there would be something like that, where we're saying we're going to save money in personnel, but here's how these roles are going to be combined. And the reason I'm asking that is because while there's savings there, I'm just making sure that we're not overwhelming our staff. Even though I love the savings, there can be costs with it.
Yeah, I can start the answer, and if these guys want to finish it, it'll start with position control. And that's one of the things that we've been talking about over the last year and a half, and with our new HR director coming on, ensuring that we know where everybody is allocated throughout the budget based on the actual position. So we don't necessarily have an org chart where we show we had X amount of custodians, now we have this amount of custodians. One of the things that I do is follow a formula. Pennsylvania puts out a formula of X amount of square foot per custodian. We're already, definitely covered for that. And then when we start to look at other positions, like we've basically reported out to the board as we've done it as to what that's looked like and how that's been effective. But position control is probably the best way to deal with your question. But,
Yeah.
Dr. Mann,
And-
do you want to add something to that?
Yes, and what I will tell you is that some of it, well, we have really tried to commit to ourselves not to reduce positions through by riffing people, right? That we've really every position has been done through attrition. Now, in order to do that through attrition, we have to look for the opportunities when vacancies occur. And I'll give you an example in that we had 2 vacancies occur right around the same time in the business office. And that provided us an opportunity to think, well, if we re-envision this, we can consolidate 2 into 1, elevate and reorganize the office. And we come back and report on that. And it was just, I think, maybe 2 months ago, it was about $100,000 in savings in the office. And we're very confident that we're not overtaxing the people who are there. But again, it's a very good question for the board to ask. Now, the more challenging, and we've done that extensively in the technology department, we've done it in the curriculum office. And so really from an administrative clerical point of view, we've led out front from as far as the instruction is concerned, but yet we also have reduced staff on the instructional end. And I mean, that's the one that is more challenging, the one that properly raises more questions. And that will be driven not because we have a particular plan in place, but we look at what vacancies will occur as the retirements come in the later the spring. And then we come back to the board and we say, look, first we will come to the view that, hey, this is something that we can accomplish. And then we will come back to the board because it's a sensitive topic and say, look, we believe, for example, we could consolidate, and this was one example maybe 2 years ago, we could consolidate a social studies position at the high school, right? And the board had questions and we produced numbers. We said, this is an estimation of section size and this and that and the other thing. And then we just moved forward with it, but it would never do so over the objection of the school board. So it's a transparent process, one that we would again talk about as the budget unfolds, but it's hard for us to precisely say where these are going to occur because we have kind of committed ourselves not to move people along, involuntarily.
But I would add to that if you find out that there are changes in that particular area that you need to adapt, you would adapt and adjust accordingly after a particular realignment was taking place and you had to change it, you would change it. It's not set in stone for X number of time. This is the evaluation process. Is that correct?
Yes, every vacancy brings scrutiny. And some of that scrutiny is just quick. Well, we need that physics teacher, for example, right? But if we have, for instance, 2 vacancies in the central office, and we look at a talented staff and we say, if we bring someone in with this certain skill set, that might be able to, and we have capable people like, for instance, Mr. Rohrbaugh, who's able to expand his portfolio. Those are the things that we do. And I think that we can demonstrate success. And again, we're much quicker to do it from the administrative, clerical aspect of things than we are in the instruction, but we also will bring to the board instructional recommendations when we think it appropriate.
And Stephen, in November, you had a really helpful presentation for the board that kind of delineated, and was it before your time on the board, Mr. Carney, delineating some of those positions and that attrition that took place. And perhaps that piece of information is something that we could recirculate with the new board, just so we're all on the same page of kind of addressing that question. We've seen some of that, but a refresher on that might be that kind of a piece of information.
I
might
was
be
sitting
nice.
out there when it happened.
What's that? Oh, you were
I
sitting
was
out
here,
there.
yeah, it was
Oh,
just in
okay.
a different seat.
All right, but so that information does exist. So perhaps we can get that to board members as a board. It was helpful to look at. Great. Any other budget questions for Mr. Pepe? I had one just to clarify my own thinking when you were going over thank you for the combination of facilities as we consider the needs of our facilities and how it impacts the budget. The only question I had for my own mind was on the slide addressing, I guess, more of an HVAC systems. So you had that slide when you said you had auditorium. Was that addressing auditorium needs or auditorium HVAC internal systems?
HVAC internal systems.
Specifically
they're
for that space.
Specifically for that space, correct.
Okay, thank you.
If I could just,
Yes,
okay,
Dr.
if I
Mann,
could,
go ahead.
one final comment in that Mr. Pepe and I came from different places, and we have I think some remarkable overlap in our schedules and our processes for budget. We've kind of been doing it in a similar fashion in separate settings, and this is, I think, my 24th presentation to a board regarding a district budget, and most of them have been pretty good, and this is the strongest in the 24 years that I've been able to present. So board members that have been here, I think this is a cause for, like, hey, good job. For the board members who are coming, you're coming at the right time because it was very different, when the current board members were kind of working through some of these challenges. And it's a really good place for us to be. And we have challenges. I hope you saw the lightning in one of his presentations, right? So there are a few clouds out there, but Southern Lehigh had a very strong year, and we should all be very proud of that. And I thank the board for the hard work, the questioning, the inquiries, the challenges that you have put forth for administration in this time. And again, that's a good budget presentation, and I've seen a lot of them.
Thank you. We echo the sentiment. We appreciate the work that goes into that and the forecasting. We all appreciate the data-driven decisions, and the forecasting is a big part of that. We thank you for that, Mr. Pepe. Just so that we some discussion of budget timeline, just so we're all on the same page as new board moves forward with this, we'll continue to discuss the budgets as they move forward and the refinement and get into the more specific items. 30 days, we have a preliminary budget vote will be our first vote on the budget this year, which occurs 30 days prior to the final budget vote.
That's correct. So that would be like in the month of May. And that'll tee it up for the final budget vote in June.
Great. And just so we're all on the same page again, the Act 1 decision to not go above the Act 1 index has already been made in a vote. I believe the board voted on that in November. So that decision has already been made. We won't be going above the Act 1 index. A common question that I've experienced in the budgeting process year to year is once that preliminary budget is voted upon and approved 30 days before, is that something some folks say, that is still in flux, or that those budget numbers can change? I've heard.
I always say with the draft budget, the numbers can go up, they can go down, or they can stay the same. It is generally our intent to try and keep it where it is. And because we've kind of been fleshing it out and moving forward, by the time the board adopts that, it's to comply with the law to allow people 30 days to review. And if they come to the board with questions, that they can, ask and be entertained.
Right, but it's just that a preliminary budget, so it also gives the community time to reflect and see how
100%.
the board and to weigh in on that. So it can be up, down, or stay the same. Great, just so we're all on the same page. Any questions about the process and the timeline we're looking at as a board? Okay, seeing none. We do have the CLIU. I took the L-Tri-C while Mr. Moore was still at the podium here. Could I please have a motion to approve the general operating budget as discussed by Mr. Pepe for the Carbon Lehigh CLIU for 24-25?
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Boyer. And the second, thank you, Ms. Cruz. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? Wonderful. All right, moving on to the royalty agreement. Do we have any explanation? This is a new, not an annual agreement.
Yeah, this is really pretty easy. This is something that was happening at the high school, but it wasn't getting board approved. It needs to be board approved. And it's simply continuing something that has been in place for a while. And this is so you can see the Southern Lehigh apparel at the food store. I'm blanking on the name.
The Giant, the
Giant,
rack in
there
the
you
frozen
go.
aisle of Giant?
Yeah.
Yeah,
That's
okay.
CVS.
Right next to the frozen peas where you get your
Yep.
Suddenly High sweatshirts? Okay. So this is a royalty agreement that this understanding was that Suddenly High would receive a portion of the proceeds for those sold. And does this include the utilization of our logo as well?
Yeah,
the
whatever they
official-
come up with. But what was important is it doesn't give them exclusive rights to. And in the future, if we decide to pull it back, we certainly can.
And there was some, once we trademarked that logo, there was is this part of that, giving them permission to use that in print, or is
Yeah,
that?
and see, this is, and the dilemma we faced is that we've taken the view that any contract should be approved by the board that involves money, right? Now, this has been going on for a long time, right? And they're using it and they send a check in, and great. But that's not great because we need, speaking of internal controls, right? Administration should not be striking out on agreements. Now, we did not go into the logo and the trademarks and all. We said, look, this is going on. We need to get it to the board. If we need to work on it in the future, we will. But this is a matter of disclosure of an ongoing issue that just has been in place absent, from what we can understand, board knowledge and approval, which really should have happened before it got started in the first place.
And we're talking hundreds of dollars, not
This is
thousands of
nothing.
dollars, not tens of thousands
Right.
of dollars.
Right. Whatever inventory turns over in the frozen food aisle of Giant, basically, is right. So okay, good.
And we only get a portion,
Okay.
which the school gets.
All right. Any other questions on that agreement? Yeah, go ahead. Motion to approve, Mr. Carney. Thank you. Second. I didn't catch who that was. Thank you, Ms. Torba. Second. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? All right. Copier lease agreement.
Yeah, this is really easy. And this goes to the flexibility question that was asked. When we look holistically and try and put forward a plan or a program, we always go back to see how well it's working or if there's any modifications that are needed. We had one use identified. It was actually the art room at the high school. And with the change in the machines, they were not able to do some of what they had in their curriculum. So at that point, it was determined that, you know what, even though 3 companies came in and all 3 companies said a printer would work in place of a copier, they actually need the copier. So this copier is an addition to the overall lease, and I believe it's $159 a month, and it's going to be part of the same lease, so it's on the same cycle. So that's why this is being added, and it's going to the high school. And I don't think there's any other questions, which is great because it got delivered today.
Motion to approve. I've been in schools with bad copiers.
Thank you, Mr. Carney. Motion and a second. Second, thank you, Dr. Wayock. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Wonderful.
Okay, the next item, Madam President, I'm just going to give you a quick overview.
That's
'cause
perfect.
it's
Just
really
keep going,
great.
Mr.
Yep.
Pepe. Thanks.
The Liberty Bell Elementary PTA is making a donation, and we actually have the check in hand of $49,027.32 for playground equipment that is going to be purchased by the district through CoStars. This is a program that goes back many years, and Kyle Gangware, one of the board members that was familiar with the project, had asked me about that early on. So this represents many years at Brian Mansfield's school where the PTA has been working towards this. And this particular project has been in concert with, our principal, Brian, as well as the facilities director, going out to make sure that we're getting the appropriate equipment in the appropriate space. And how can we help the PTA and save some money in the installation with the wood chips or whatever needs to go in there. So once you approve the donation, that'll go into the support services agenda item A. It's the same playground. So we're purchasing it so that we have rights to the license, the warranty, and everything else, and make sure that it's compliant with safety rules and regulations.
Thank you. And thanks to the Liberty Bell PTA and all those years of saving and donating. That is a wonderful contribution from our community. And I hear you understand the school will be supporting the cost of, the ground preparation and,
Yep.
and wood chipping and all that. Great. Any questions regarding that item?
Since they're associated with letters 9A, can
Yes.
we just go and combine the two and vote on both?
Yes. We have the donation and we have the utilization of, no, wait, I'm sorry. Those are in two different sections, yes?
Two different sections.
How about we
same
take-
topic.
How about we just take, we'll skip that. Do we have any questions about the Ready to Learn grant utilization that's between those two items, Mr. Boyer? Yeah, exactly. We also have a motion to utilize, right? Motion to utilize funds from the Ready to Learn grant towards the salaries of existing current employees in Spanish immersion program at Liberty Bell. Do we have any questions or any report on that we need to know about under the Ready to Learn grant? It's just utilization of grant money, and we thank you so much. Grants are hard to write, and thanks for doing that work. All right. All right. Well, all three. So we have support services item A and items I and J. Motion from Mr. Boyer, second from Dr. Wayoff. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? All right. Moving on. We have, let's see how many of these we can take together. Yes, we have the contracted school bus transportation, item B. We have the Tri-M group for the software server upgrades. I believe Mr. Pepe already talked about with our door systems, if I remember that correctly. And we have the Provident Energy Natural Gas Supply through the consortium, approving that purchasing agreement. Do I have a motion for those items?
Make the motion.
Thank you, Mr. Boyer. Second with Dr. Wick. Any questions or comments on any of those items?
Just one question for the real short and sweet, for the doors, has that been completed or is that still ongoing?
We're still in the process,
Still ongoing.
but it should be somewhat soon.
Sounds good.
All right, somewhat soon is a good answer. Great. Thank you for the motion and the second. Somewhat soon. Brought to you in the mouths of Mr. Robach. We thank you. All right, all those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? Mr. Pepe, yes.
Madam President, the specialized student transportation piece, I
Yes.
appreciate that got approved. There was a significant amount of work that went into that, setting up the bid spec, going through the process, and Sue Knoll is with us tonight. Sue, if you could just stand up a minute. I just want to recognize her.
Yes, please.
I would like to recognize Sue in my office for, I think, about 19 years of service with the district. She is retiring and she will be leaving the district at the end of the month. But she was significant in this as well as every other aspect of transportation. And, really, really appreciate that work.
student is missing, we need to stay till late at night, or when the bus is in a ditch at 5 o'clock in the morning, Mrs. Will is there. At 4:30 in the morning, we're thinking about clouds coming in and snow falling. Mrs. Will is at the forefront of making sure that things are safe. So her roles and responsibilities far extend beyond the scheduled day, and she has a sense of concern and kindness for the safety of our students that is unmatched. And so I want to thank you.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you for your years of service. You will be missed. And to those parents who are listening out there, Sunil is also the individual who, when you have those busing questions at the beginning of the year, I think I first spoke to her as a kindergarten parent when I said, my one son is being picked up at this end of the block to go to Libertyville. My other son's being picked up at the other end of the block. Could we put them together? And she was the friendly voice who said, well, that just makes sense because you can't run that fast, Mrs. Gaiman. So for all those parents out there, she's the one who really helps solve your problems. And she will be missed by parents and students and administrators alike. So thank you so much for your years of service. And thank you, Mr. Pepe, for pointing that out. All right, moving on to human resources. We have the human resources report. I'm sorry.
Ms. Gaiman, I need to leave. I apologize, but I need to leave early.
Understood,
Okay,
Mr. Mon.
so
We
I
still
just
have
wanna let you know.
quorum. We understand these things happen. Thanks so much. Appreciate it. All right, moving on to our human resources report. Anything of particular note, Mr. Dr. Ake Little?
I would say that it is an extensive report because it is both retrospective and prospective at the same time. From December, actually from our last board meeting, I would say mid-November to now, but also our athletic director, as always, has been quite proactive in doing spring sports as well. So it is a pretty extensive list. Most of it is athletics. But at the same time, we have been very good about addressing current staffing needs, as well as when we have LTSs, as you'll see on the first appointment. And we are already even approving prom chaperones because we like that. The last thing I want to mention is my assistant has been very diligent about getting new substitutes. I know there's a substitute shortage. We actually, when she went, I'm saying we as a department, but it's really her, to the IU, they had a guest teacher program. I think it worked out for us because many of the institutions didn't realize they had the guest teacher program orientation that day. And so we were a handful. But you'll notice on section I, we netted a lot of people who were there and interested. So once we approve them this evening, then tomorrow they are eager to begin substituting for us. So one person's loss, another person's gain.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. We appreciate you doing that work for us. Do we have any questions about the human resources report for Dr. Ake Little?
Yes.
Yes, Ms. Reinhardt. And Ms. Reinhardt, could you turn on your microphone just so we can?
Sorry.
Thank you.
How do you determine the graduate study approvals for the teachers? I'm seeing here a number of folks doing ESL certifications. That's English as a second language?
Yes, you mean is this at the end on when it says for your information only?
Yeah,
Oh.
I'm just curious about how administration makes decisions as to the relevancy of the graduate programs we're paying for teachers to their actual jobs. And it's just my comment. The dyslexia certificate for a reading teacher seems totally relevant, but a positive psychology graduate certificate for a social studies teacher, I'm just not quite sure how they connect.
So
just for clarification, are we talking about, Ms. Reinhardt, are we talking, item 10 is the resource.
But
so
it's
we're
HR related.
Sure. So I just want us to all be on the same page. So we're talking now about item number 15 on the agenda. I think it's great to talk about HR all at once. I'm just clarifying that's what we're talking about, item 15.
Yes,
Wonderful.
that's what I said
Thank
we
you.
were talking about.
Yes.
Wonderful.
So the SLEA SLSD collective bargaining agreement has a particular section on what's called the Advanced Course Management Committee. And one of the board members sits on that committee. In November, it was Mr. Demig. Currently, it is Mr. Carney, as well as 2 members of the association, as well as myself. So there are 4 individuals for a all of these individuals that are listed here submitted an application. There is a question on there about how they plan to use this in their classroom. We actually also note to them that because in one of their domains in the evaluation professional responsibilities, so we asked them to tie that into their larger application as well. Then the four of us, we meet monthly to deliberate. There are spirited discussions, to your point, if a program is relevant or not, but we then take a vote, and it requires 3 individuals to approve the program. And in these cases, these individuals did receive the 3 out of 4 votes that were necessary to receive approval for their program.
And that's a school district policy?
That is part of the
That
collective
committee?
bargaining agreement, yes.
It's part of the collective bargaining agreement, or is it a district policy as to who sits on that committee?
That committee is to our SLEA, the association nominates there 2. One is, I believe, according to the agreement, a designee of the superintendent, and then which in that case would be me, as his designee.
Okay, thank you for your
No problem.
information. I appreciate it.
Okay, back to the, glad you asked the question. Back to the human resources report. Any questions there? I just had one, and Dr. Ickliddle mentioned it. It was the first item on the report. And actually, I guess it's more of a question for Dr. Mann. I had a parent ask me today that they saw the first item on this human resources report was a long-term substitute for the library position at JPLS Intermediate School due to the retirement of Heidi Chavone. And the parent was asking me, I see a long-term sub is on the agenda, but we really are getting a full-time librarian in there. This isn't. So, Dr. Mann, do you have an update for the community for that parent's concern of, just to reiterate, this is a long-term sub for the remainder of the year, but we will be filling that position with a certificated librarian, anticipated start date of
In the start of the 24-25 school year.
start of the 24-25 school year we will have. So this long-term sub is only for the remainder of this year, and we will have a fully certificated person in that position at the start of that. So rest assured, we had a lot of community correspondence, making sure it was very important to them. We had a library in that early childhood setting. So we will indeed. This is not this is not the permanent solution.
No, by way of background, we had a very rigorous selection process. We posted the job, advertised, received a very surprisingly large number of credentialed, qualified candidates. They went through the selection process led by Mr. McGinty. And as it happens, an internal candidate, a certified librarian, is also one of our very well-respected, high-achieving elementary teachers. And so we believe that person will do an excellent job as our full-time librarian. However, the idea that we would transfer that student mid-year and then hire a long-term sub for that class, we know to be disruptive to elementary students to kind of switch a teacher in the middle of the year. So rather than hire the long-term sub for that teacher and have a transition in both the library and in that classroom, we thought it much better to hire the long-term sub to get to the end of the year for the librarian, knowing that in the spring, we'll hire a classroom teacher for the person who will be our librarian. And then, we'll be all set with the least impact in transition for elementary students.
Thank you for that explanation. Appreciate it. So a teacher will be transferred, and that'll be on a future board agenda that we will see for that.
No,
No.
because
it's an internal transfer, it doesn't need to be board approved? Okay, wonderful. Well, then thank you for that explanation.
And we will, however, have a candidate to hire for the board to approve for the elementary position.
Great, thank you. And least disruptive to students. Thank you. Wonderful. All right, moving on to appointments. Item number 11. We have 2 vacancies not vacancies, terms are expiring for our representatives, the school board, the school district representatives on the Southern Lehigh Public Library Board. And we asked for applications to be received. We received 3 applications. The individuals' names are listed on our agenda here tonight. And the way we'll proceed for this voting item is to nominate individuals from that list of 3
just as we did for another board position, board officers, for example, that we did in December. So at this time, I would like to open the floor to nominations for Southern Lehigh's Public Library Board. Yeah,
I'm just
Mr. Carney?
I'll move the first name on the list. I move Sue Arnold.
all right. I have a nomination for Susan Arnold,
Second.
and I have a second. Thank you, Dr. Wack. Do we have two positions? So I'll just continue to receive nominations. Any other nominations?
I'll nominate Ryan Allen.
All right, we have a motion and a second for Ryan Allen. And do we have any other nominations?
I motion to nominate Kathleen Parsons.
Kathleen Parsons, thank you. I have that nomination. Do I have a second? Thank you, Ms. Torba, for the second. I'm sorry, I wasn't repeating those motions and seconds for our secretary. Do we need any clarification, or did you catch all those? You got them? All right, thanks. Sorry, I didn't announce. All right, so since all applicants were nominated, can I close the floor to nominations, assuming there are no others? Great. Did I get a motion over here? Close nominations. Thank you, Dr. Wayak. And a second. Thank you, Ms. Cruz. All right, nominations are closed. I'll just take these in the order that they were nominated and that they appear on the agenda. And could I have, and I guess just for clarification, maybe we'll raise hands because we're going to have different, yeah. So when you vote aye or nay, we'll ask you to raise your hands just so our board secretary has a representation so we can all count. So I'll take Susan Arnold first. All those in favor of appointing Susan Arnold, aye, and kindly raise your hands as well. All right, we have this looks unanimous. Susan Arnold, thank you. So that's our first person who has obtained the requisite 5 votes. And now I will ask for all those in favor of Ryan Allen. Raise your hands and say aye. I have a count of 3. All right, thank you. And all those in favor of Kathleen Parsons, aye. I have a count of 5. And we'll pause for our board secretary to make sure she captured all of that. So I see that Susan Arnold and Kathleen Parsons acquired the requisite number of majority vote. And we would like to congratulate, I believe we have Susan Arnold in the audience tonight. We thank you for attending. Congratulations. Thank you very much for applying to be our public library representative. We look forward to hearing from you and working with you in the future.
Just also wanted to thank Dr. Wayak for his service for the last year on the library board.
Yes, thank you very much.
And Emily, I was pleased with the nominees, the forms that came in. I was impressed.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
I will absolutely say sometimes it's difficult to fill that position. And we had wonderfully qualified folks.
Was there an opportunity to provide comments and questions prior to voting?
On that particular item about the individuals nominated?
Yes.
I did not. Would you like, you could have, sorry, feel free whenever I neglect to do that. I was more concerned about the nomination process. I apologize. Feel free to interrupt me. Did you have a comment or a question about it?
I would just like us to revisit the allocation of $71,400 in the budget process to the library for funding. I also am concerned that we have 2 positions from this board to be represented at the library, but we had no board members interested in serving to do that, although many board members are serving on multiple committees. So that I am concerned about. And I would like to see us talk a little bit about potentially reallocating that $71,400 to support our own internal school district library functions, including potentially providing in-service instructions to teachers on how to conduct primary source research. I don't know that we need to hire a full-time librarian in the high school, but I do think the teachers need some education on how to conduct that research. And I'd like some information on access to primary source materials. Is that available through Source, or is that something we would have to add? So that's my comment, and hopefully in a board meeting or a workshop in the future, we can revisit that.
Okay, great. I'm glad that the nomination process was clear. The next thing we have is new business, so that glides right in. If you excuse me for one. I did not. It comes to my attention. Thank you to our solicitor for pointing out. I did not officially take a motion and vote to approve the human resources report. We had a lot of questions about it, but I never. Thanks for pointing that out. On either side of me, that's what they're here for. Could I have a motion to approve the HR report? Thank you, Ms. Reinhardt. Thank you, Dr. Wayak. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? Thank you very much.
you.
All right. So,
I didn't even. I should have known, but I didn't.
all right, great. Moving on to committee reports. We are in the process of scheduling. We were just discussing today and in the past week. We have a lot of meetings coming up as a board, and we are in the process of scheduling. Those meetings will be publicly posted on our website as they are available. Does anyone have any particular committee reports? I don't believe we've had a ACMC perhaps met, but Mr. Carney?
I was going to say ACMC did not meet.
Oh, okay.
But LCTI, I'm attending the Skills USA on Wednesday, and I'm on the school climate committee subcommittee for that. So I'm looking forward to that meeting Wednesday.
Great, thank you. And Mr. Mond is our other representative on LCTI, but he had to leave early. So thanks for letting us know. You'll have an upcoming report after the Wednesday meeting. All right, great. Any other committee reports? Someone pointed out to me that I neglected to identify when we had folks reporting out last time. We have committees, we have new individuals on those committees, and committee chairs, and so that is something actually that we can update. We can update the folks who are serving on those committees on the website, so people know who are serving on those committees now that we have them. The committee chairs for Eric Boyer is the facilities committee chair. Mr. Carney's the education committee chair. I'm the policy committee chair. And I think those technology. Thank you. Ms. Torba is the technology chair. And we can list maybe under our pictures on the website who is on what committee or something, so folks know who to reach out to if they have a particular question about that committee going forward. All right. Anything else under committees? Yes?
Facilities committee, we do have a meeting on Thursday night. That will be for informational purposes to bring board members up to speed for the new year. It is open to the public, and that will be at 6 o'clock, and it will be here, and that will be on Thursday night this week. So that should be updated and reflected on the school board website.
And my understanding is that will be an information, so no deliberation or decision making will take place, but you're welcome to attend for information as the public to hear the same information the board members will be receiving, kind of a Q&A for the board members. All right, wonderful. Anything else? Okay, we're moving on to new business. Any new business for the good of the order?
I will bring up one thing. So for those of you who aren't aware, our baseball coach here at Southern Lehigh, Todd Miller, he is going to his 26th year of coaching. For anybody inclined seeing Morning Call or Facebook or whatever social media platform you may use, he was inducted into the Athletic Hall of Fame at Parkland High School. So congratulations to Todd Miller, one of our teachers here at the school. And in regards to that, I just want to bring up while at Parkland, I thought something that came across that was really interesting was the fact that Parkland does a really good job at getting information out to folks of the community, not just school district. So at a future board meeting, I would like for us to look into investigating ways that we can get more information out to the public about what's going on, not just in the school, but also just in the community as well, and sharing that information. I know we talked about Southern Lehigh Education's Foundation. So it would be great to see that kind of information get out, because a lot of community members don't necessarily go on Southern Lehigh's website, and a lot of folks don't also go on Southern Lehigh's Facebook page, Twitter, whatever other Instagram things there are. So I just want to make not a motion, but just like to see that be discussed at future meetings here, to see what kind of things that we have either in place or things that we can improve on to get more information out to folks in the district.
Okay, thanks. Discussion point that has been round and round about how we can get more information to the community is always welcome, and not a new thing to this table, but thank you, Eric, for bringing that up. Mr. Carney.
Musical tickets are on sale. They're looking for business ads, so if anybody knows any businesses, please get in touch with them. Also, Saturday, there's a set build from 10 to 2. Robotics this Thursday at Mod Pizza in Quakertown. If you go get something down there, 25% of the profit will go to the robotics team. I want to thank the Hopewell PTA. Some of the members were here last month. they invited me to go to their PTA meeting, and I got to hear about a dance, a Spring Fest, fundraising, playground equipment, and they're just doing some things. I worked at schools that had some active PTAs and ones that didn't. PTAs, I can't thank you enough for the work that you're doing. So anybody that's on the PTA serving out there, thank you. And the last one is another thing to think about. I watched the PA House Education Committee this week. I had extra time. And they're talking about possible legislation where student IDs from grades 6 to 12 would have just a suicide prevention hotline number on it on the student IDs. So for us, maybe it would be grades 7 to 12. I'm wondering if we could possibly talk to the photo company that does the IDs, if I'm assuming we have something, if there would be no cost to maybe adding something like a 988 number. It wouldn't be a lot of text, maybe no cost. The reason I'm bringing it up, I saw that 9 states have it. Pennsylvania's talking about it. It seemed to have some bipartisan support. And I've read anecdotally from people that, my student used that, and hearing some parent stories from some other states.
I think that would require some study on our part, because while I think there may be some anecdotal information about it being good, there's also some suggestion, again, hearing this for the first time, right? It's an issue that has to be, suicide awareness is an issue that has to be approached with caution. So I think it's a very good thing for us to consider, but before I would endorse it right away, I think we would have to all look at that and say, how is that?
I'm throwing it out there as an idea. I'm not making a motion. I'm just saying, exploring the possibilities, more discussion.
Very, very fair to consider, but I would be hesitant to jump right in on that.
That's fine.
Anything else? No. I'm going to clarify that, put this under other business. I neglected to mention that in addition to getting the committees up and running, we had mentioned we want to have student representatives on this board reporting into us. There was a lot to do from an administrative level at the high school, and we were lucky enough to have our new assistant principal coming on board. We had that vote at our last meeting, and so we have not forgotten student representatives. That is still on our to-do list. I had said hopefully by this meeting we would have something in place, but we're still working on that process, but rest assured it's not forgotten. So the month of February, one way or another, I think we're going to have a student at this table, regardless of whether or not it's a permanent solution or a temporary, rotating, visitation student rep. We were going to have that. I'm going to on that. I just neglected to make that update. All right. For information only, we have field trip requests in the graduate study. And with that, I'm going, yes.
Southern Lehigh Education Foundation. Dr. Mann, if you don't mind, I'll post it in there for everybody here for the February 8th meeting.
Do we have an update about an a foundation event?
So there is Southern Lehigh Education Foundation. I believe it's on the February 8th. It is going to be held off-site at Upper Saucon Social Quarters, otherwise known as the Q, for you locals. So anybody that has information on or wants to know information about it, please feel free to look at their website, or if you go to southernlehigh.slsd.org, you can see the link for SLEF on there, and it'll take you to the page, and it's under the news and upcoming events. And feel free to come out and see what's going on with
5:30 to 10, I think.
You need to buy a ticket to get in, and it's $25 per person. And just show up.
All right. So just to recap that, we information for everyone. For the a $25 ticket, please check out SLEA's website or SLSD's website. For that, we always want to support our education foundation. Now, I know we're all itching to get out of here, but I don't believe any other visitors have signed in to speak. I didn't see anyone walk across the room, nor do I see. So I'm saying we have no visitor comments for this evening, in which case I'm looking for a motion to adjourn.
Ms. Gaiman, I just have to sprinkle in a little humor.
Oh, yes, please.
Mr. Boyer, you brought up, notifying the community of things, maybe like a newsletter. You and Mr. Carney, with a sprinkle of Ms. Reinhardt's, seem to be our newsletter. So we appreciate all your bandwidth of making everyone aware of what's to come in our community and district.
You're right. Well
Just
said.
Sprinkle a little humor.
That's wonderful. Well said. Well said. We always want to hear those pieces of joy. And hopefully, when we have student reps up here, we'll be hearing more of those good news announcements about what's going on in our district as well. All right. So now I'm safe to look for a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Thank you, Ms. Cruz. And we are adjourned. Thank you so much for turning out this evening. Folks, we appreciate it.